What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to my 5 or 6 part series where I go over all the characters I have and the builds. Now, keep in mind, they're not all best in slot with the best gears, but this is what I use, and all the characters I am showing you the builds of are ready for all dungeons and trials, and they have actually completed everything, so what I have, even if it's not 100% best in slot, they still work. So today, we're going to be going over our tank. This is my Dragonknight. It is an Imperial, so let's get started. So as usual, what we're going to be doing is going over all the gear, champion points, skills, and I'll try to do my best to explain why I use it. Now, keep in mind what works for me does not always work for everyone else, so there's a lot of different ways to play a tank. There's no real right or wrong way to play. This is what I just found that works for me, so if you are interested in an Imperial Dragonknight, this would be perfect for you. So, with that said, let's get started. Let's go to a place where there's not too many people, so the lag will be a little bit lower. Alright, so first of all, we're going to go over our attributes and everything else. So, the way I put my attributes are 34 into health and 30 into stamina. Now, ideally, you just want to stay above 30,000 health. Why I chose 35,000 is because I'm still kind of new to tanking, but I know how to do it enough to the point where I can do trials. But like the better I get at it, the lower I drop my health down to around 30,000. But just for like to be safe and all that stuff, that's why I have that. Now we're going to be using all 3 attributes for the most part. Stamina obviously is used for blocking and your skills, magic as well. And since you're a tank, obviously health is pretty good. So our Mundus Stone, we're using the Atronach because it increases your magic recovery, and having magic is generally a good thing. So yeah. With that said, let's start off with our skills, or not skills, my gear. So for our 2-piece, we're using Bloodspawn. Now, these aren't particularly in the right traits. Now, when I say traits, I usually see the enchant, and then the trait is under it, just in case, for all of you who didn't know. So, ideally for Bloodspawn, the 2-piece set is good because it gives you resistances and chance to regain ultimate when you're damaged. So, having your ultimate for Warhorns and everything is generally a good thing. So, for heavy, we're going to want 7 pieces of heavy. Some people run with like other stuff, but that's fine. For heavy, ideally the trait you want is infused because it is a large piece, which means your resources will be higher in terms of your enchant, so that's always good. So infused instead of sturdy. And then for our second piece of the shoulder, instead of divines, we want an infused piece, or not infused, we want a sturdy since this is a small piece as well. So both heavy, generally good, but infused and sturdy. So our next set we're going to be used is actually pretty easy to get. You get it in both Crypt parts 1 and 2. We are using the Ebon set. Now, the reason why we use this is because my tank is more built for trials, but it does work in dungeons and everything else as well. So for our chest piece, we're using an infused one because it is a large piece with the prismatic enchant. And it does really well, actually, because you're going to be wanting both stamina, magic, and health, so that's why we used the prismatic enchant. It is also pretty expensive, one of the most expensive enchants in the game. So if you don't have that, depending on how your playstyle is, you could always add whatever slot. If you're above 30,000 health, just dump it into like stamina or something, magic, doesn't really matter. But ideally, if you can afford the prismatic, that is the best way to go because you are actually using all 3 resources. Next, we have the sturdy belt, just because it is a small piece, and we use that to block and another prismatic enchant. Next, we have the Sabatons, which is still purple because it's not the right trait I'm looking for. I do want a sturdy piece instead of reinforced. Ideally, as long as you have the set, you're good to go. But if you're trying to min-max everything, it is still the best for getting sturdy. So ultimately, you'll be fine. And same with the gloves. Once I get the gloves, everything should be prismatic enchanted, but I want sturdy for these two pieces, the boots and the gloves, so that's why they're not golded out yet. And then for the pants, we have an infused large piece again. When I say large and small pieces, the difference is, like, some of these give a lot of extra resources. So, for example, if this wasn't enchanted, notice how it says 500 to resources. Well, this one is like 170 or something. That's the difference between a large and a small piece. So infused for a large piece over here, and then this one is prismatic enchanted as well. So everything I have gold is something else to use. So our second set we're using right now is the Alkosh piece. Now this comes from Maw of Lorkhaj. You can get the blue rings from there. So ideally, as long as you have the set, it doesn't really matter what rarity it is. So if you want the best in slot, you're going to have to do veteran. Or just do any weekly. The weeklies give Maw of Lorkhaj rewards, so you could still technically get it by doing the weeklies. So I have all three golden Alkosh pieces, and the enchant I use is the shield play, because as a tank you're going to be bashing things and blocking, so that's generally a good thing. If you don't need this and have a lot more stamina than you really know what to do with, you could add Magicka, which would increase your ability uses for the back. We'll get into that later, but I feel like I'm doing fine the way I am. Now, the weapons are the most difficult things you can get. Now, we are using the Alkosh pieces as weapons. Ideally, some of these are not in the right traits that I want, but as long as you have the set, it doesn't really matter. Now, as for the traits on it, it's not super important, because as a tank, you're not going for maximum damage. You're going to try to make sure you're tanking the enemies and, you know, not dying. So, ideally, I would want 2 swords of Alkoshes, but I can't get them because RNG hates me. So, this is what I have to work with at the moment. So, we have an infused one. The best in slot for the trait would either be defending or, I don't know, like Nirnhoned, I guess. And then that's what I get with the Crusher enchantment. Now, the enchantment by default is Crusher, so I didn't actually have to change it. What it does is reduces the resistances, which is what you want to do, pretty much zero out the enemy resistances so everyone on your party or group can do more damage. And then we have 2 shields. So the shields you want are like probably like reinforced or defending, Nirnhoned if possible, and then infused is also pretty good. So these are both prismatic enchanted. Unfortunately, I can't get the perfect trait, so I'm happy with infused. If I could get another infused, that'd be good, but if you're doing main one and stuff, that would be different. So 1 obviously is our main bar. 2, we have an axe. Ideally, I don't want an axe, but it's the only thing I can get at the moment. So it's something we have to deal with at the time just to get the 5-piece when we swap bars. So, yeah, that's what it is. Default Crusher enchantment. That's what you want just to reduce it. So I know I've gone over this a lot, but that's what our set is going to be. So, with that said, let's go into our abilities. Now, there is no really right or wrong way to play a tank. This is just what works for me. So let's go into our sword and shield. The first thing we have is Heroic Slash. Now this is going to be more of our like debuff and more damage ability. So when you use it, you reduce the enemy's damage by 15%, and it does quite a bit of damage from what a tank can do. 2, Pierce Armor. This is your main like taunt ability. This is for the non-range taunt, and if you're in melee range, you can just like stab everything and they will attack you. So this is very important. Every tank will have this, I guarantee you. So this is, you see, even it has the role of a tank on it. That's why it's important. Don't get the other morph, always Pierce Armor. Don't even look at the other one, just get Pierce Armor. So next one, we are going into the Dragonknight line. So, where is it? first of all, we have everything in Earthen Heart. We have the Igneous Shields, simply because when you cast it, it increases your healing and it gives you a shield, so just not dying is generally a good thing, just in general. So everything else is good. Now we have Hardened Armor. Where is that? Right here. The reason why we use this is it increases your resistances, and you also gain a damage shield equal to 15% of your health for 2.8 seconds. So it also returns magic damage to melee attackers, which is kind of irrelevant. We're using it for the shield and pretty much resistances. And now we have shield chart, or the absorb magic. This is over here. You absorb damage, essentially giving you more shields and healing for your max health. And this will also, like, if you have a shield equipped, this ability, you can block more and reduces the cost of it. So you will be blocking a lot as a tank. Alright, so we're going on to our back bar right now. And then we have, where is it? Coagulating Blood. Now, this one is going to be used for healing slightly and increases your health recovery. So just not dying is pretty good. Once again, this is pretty important. Now we have Unrelenting Grip. This is probably the next most important ability. It makes everything for tanking easier. Now, it chains enemies to you, and that's what you want. Now, the reason why we chose the Unrelenting Grip is because this game sometimes is dumb, and sometimes, like, if you're at a weird angle, you can't actually chain the enemy. So if they cannot be pulled, it's like a free cast. So that's why we have it, instead of just wasting 3,500 magic and realizing that, oh, you're on a weird angle and it can't be chained. So that's why we use this one. Next on our list is Igneous Weapons. This is a pretty common skill. It gives your allies increased damage, and it actually has a really long duration time for like 40 seconds. So next on our list, we have Inner Fire. This one is under the Undaunted. Now, Inner Fire is essentially your ranged taunt. And so, like, you have two taunts. This is your close-up melee taunt, and this is your ranged taunt. So for bosses where there are, like, a lot of adds and you have to chain them, or where chains don't work, your ranged taunt will be good. For example, some bosses are like Maw of Lorkhaj, the second boss, to ranged taunt pretty much anything, or adds priorities. Very good. So as for our ultimates, ideally on your main bar you could use Barrier. Now, you won't actually be using the skill, but if you have the Magicka Aid, it increases your recovery by 10% while it's maxed out. So it's not really a huge deal, but if you want to do min-max everything, that is the ideal thing to do. Unfortunately, I made this character so long ago, it's on Daggerfall, and most of my friends who play on EP, so that's why grinding up Cyrodiil is not as fun on a different alliance. So if you don't have that, use Warhorn. This is a very huge skill. It increases your allies' resources by 27 seconds, so ideally when you morph it, it's going to be aggressive. Recently, I just got it to 4, so to get the Warhorn. And yeah, if you don't have that, just put Warhorn on both bars. If you don't have Warhorn, you can honestly use anything else, but ideally you want to be going for Warhorn. So with that said, Standard is also a good option. Dragon Leap, also pretty good. Magma Armor is maybe not so much, but... So that has been our abilities. You could swap out a few things if you didn't want to. There are a few abilities like Choking Talons, that's right here. It's kind of your like AoE crowd control, and this could be replaced if you had a few other abilities like Vigor. That also works. You could also use a lot of other things, Purge, Guard, and these are kind of your, this is your flex spot. You don't technically have to use Igneous Weapons, but ideally it's pretty good to have. So with that said, those have been the abilities. Now let's go into our champion points. Now before I show you anything, keep in mind, this just works for me. If you have some sort of different playstyle, go for it. If it works for you, just keep it. Let's start with that green one. We have 100 into Warlord, simply because it reduces the stamina cost of all spells and abilities. So cheaper skills is generally better than recovery. So we have Magician at 25, just because that is also pretty important to have as well, because we do use magic. And then we do have 75 into recovery for Arcanist, just because we want the extra passives, I guess. But ultimately, 75 into recovery for Magicka is pretty good. So that one's a pretty easy one to explain. Now we go into the blue tree. We have 100 into Blessed, because healing done is generally good. And then we have 100 into Precise Strikes, which increases the damage and healing dealt by weapon criticals by 25%. Very good. So this is the difficult part, the red tree. Now, the reason why I say it's difficult is because you can do it any way you want to, but the two main things you should be going for, and I say this in all my build videos, whether you're playing DPS or healer, these are the two most important things, Hardy and Elemental Defender. The reason why is because it gives you pretty much resistances and reduces the damage dealt to you by elements or physical. So regardless of what you do in the game, you want to even these out as much as possible. And we do have 11 into Thick Skin, just because it does reduce the damage you take from dots, which is damage over time ability. So essentially, if you're standing in stupid, then you take a little bit less damage from that. So people who stand in red, stand in fire, and other stuff that you shouldn't be standing in, it slightly negates that. Now we have 10 points into Quick Recovery, because having the 10 extra points into healing received is generally a good thing. And we do have 1 into Expert Defender, just because it reduces damage taken from light and heavy attacks. You are going to be in close range of the enemy, as you are the tank. So having that 1 extra percent may not be like a lot, but believe it or not, it does help a little bit. So those have been the trees. And let's see, what else have I not covered? Food. You will be using purple food, 150. That increases all your resources. Now, the reason why you aren't using blue food is because blue food only increases like health and 1 extra stat like stamina or magic. As for a tank, you're going to be using all 3, so that means you're going to want a little bit more of every resource. Now, keep in mind, purple food is slightly more expensive than blue food, but ultimately you can just craft it, and it's not super expensive, but it is slightly more expensive than blue. So just keep that in mind. In my opinion, I do believe tanking is one of the more expensive roles to be gearing up. Going for Prismatic Enchant is pretty costly, actually. I'm not sure how much it costs on console, but on PC it's about, I don't know, like 18,000 per Hakijo, or not. To craft it, it costs like 15,000, and for the pre-crafted ones, it's like 18,000. So you're gonna need like 7 of those slots, or maybe 9 in total, which is gonna run you over like, I would say about 200,000 gold just for that. And then purple food is, I wouldn't say purple food is not expensive, but it adds up over time. And then as for potions, you could just use anything, to be honest. If you want to try stat, restoration is also pretty good, but whatever works for you, honestly. So overall, that has been my tank build. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you had any questions, feel free to let me know. Oh yeah, so just in case you are wondering, if you don't have any Alkosh pieces, you could honestly use everything else. Leeching is pretty good. You get that in Imperial City Prison. Tava's Favor is a craftable one. Unfortunately, if you wanted Tava's Favor or any craftable ones, they do not come in jewelry, so that means you're going to have to rearrange your order for everything. Ebon does have jewelry, which is found, so you'd be using 3 Ebon, 2, and like, I don't know, 2 weapons, and then 5 crafted, or whatever you want. But just keep in mind, jewelry is the rough part to get, so yeah. Ideally, if you want to look for drop sets from Dungeons and Trials, that's probably easier, and yeah. And with that said, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys a little bit later. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to let me know what you thought of it. 78 gold, is that mine? And yeah, if you want to check more of my builds, check the link in the description to my playlist, and you can see my Magicka Templar DPS. I do have Stamsork builds. I do have a healer build. So if tank wasn't for you, then you can always check out whatever other roles I have. So with that said, see you guys next time.